They kicked down my door before sunrise, guns drawn, shouting my name like I'd already been convicted. I was still half asleep, barefoot, when they cuffed me against my own kitchen wall. The charge? Armed robbery. A convenience store I'd never even been inside. They said they had solid evidence, gloves found behind the counter, with my DNA. Only, it wasn't mine. I told them that, again and again, but truth means nothing when you're standing under flickering fluorescent lights, wearing handcuffs that bite into your skin. My mother watched from the hallway, shaking. I stayed calm, silent, calculating. Someone wanted me buried, not just arrested. And I swore that once I proved it, I'd make them regret ever touching my name. Before we dive into the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching this from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it helps me connect with you all around the world. I still remember the sound before anything else, that deep, hollow thud that doesn't belong in a quiet house. Then another. And another. The door didn't break at once, it groaned, splintered, and gave way with a final crash that sent the handle skidding across the floor. For a second, I thought it was a dream. I'd worked a night shift at the auto shop, came home greasy and exhausted, and crashed on the couch around 3 a.m. But the shouting pulled me out of sleep like a blade. Marcus Hale. Police. Hands where I can see them. It's strange how quickly your body reacts when your brain hasn't caught up. I stood up, heart slamming, half asleep, bare chest against the cold air. Flashlights flooded the room, beams slicing through the dark like interrogation lights. In seconds, there were 5 of them inside. 2 with rifles up, 1 already moving in with cuffs. I didn't fight. Didn't even speak. Just raised my hands and stared as one officer pushed me into the wall, face first, shoulder grinding into plaster. I could smell the dust. The paint. The metal of the cuffs. They read me my rights like it was a script. My mother screamed from the hallway. She'd stayed over after her chemo appointment the day before. The sound of her voice, cracking like old glass, hit me harder than the cuffs ever could. Marcus Hale, you are under arrest for armed robbery at Jensen's Market, 10th and Meadow, occurring on the night of September 14th. The words blurred together after that. Armed robbery? I was at work that night. I fixed transmissions until almost midnight. My time card could prove it. I tried to say that, but they told me to save it for the station. They dragged me barefoot into the morning air. The streetlights hadn't even gone out yet. The asphalt was still wet from rain, and my feet left pale prints as I walked. The neighbors' curtains shifted, faces watching, recording, judging. The ride to the precinct felt endless. The officer in the passenger seat kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, like he already knew the ending to a movie I hadn't seen yet. At the station, they took everything: phone, wallet, watch. They swabbed my mouth for DNA. One officer, the older one with the tired eyes, asked if I wanted to make a statement. Yeah, I said quietly. You've got the wrong guy. He didn't look convinced. Just wrote something in his notebook and left me in a holding room with flickering lights and a camera in the corner. Hours passed. Then a detective walked in, short, sharp voice, clean suit. He dropped a file on the table. Your DNA was found on the gloves left behind at the scene, he said. Black nitrile gloves. Same brand you use at the shop. My stomach dropped. He wasn't wrong, we used black nitrile gloves by the box. Grease resistant, thick, cheap. But DNA? No. Not unless someone had taken them from my station. Where'd you get the sample? I asked. He smiled, a small, practiced smirk. We'll get to that. I remember staring at those words on his lips and realizing something cold and final. This wasn't about proof. It was about a story they'd already decided to believe. By the time they let me make a call, it was almost 2 p.m. My mother's voice on the other end was shaking. She'd already called a lawyer, someone from her church knew a guy. I tried to tell her not to worry, that it was a mistake. But even as I said it, I felt something unravel in my chest. I wasn't just fighting a charge. I was fighting an invisible hand, someone who wanted me erased. That night, in the holding cell, I stared at the ceiling tiles until dawn. I replayed every face at work, every conversation, every shift swap, every person who might have touched those gloves. There was one, a new hire named Devin. Always watching. Always too interested in my workbench. And as the morning light crept through the bars, I made myself a promise: if someone wanted to ruin my life, they'd pick the wrong man to frame. They released me on bail 2 days later, $10,000 I didn't have, posted by a cousin who probably emptied his savings to do it. The second I walked out, the air felt different. Thinner. Like I was breathing through a screen. My name was already on the local news ticker: auto mechanic arrested in armed robbery, DNA evidence under review. My face wasn't shown, but everyone in town knew who they meant. Small towns are like that, rumors spread faster than truth ever can. When I got back home, the door was still cracked from the raid. The hinges hung loose, wood splintered like broken bones. My mother had cleaned up what she could, but the place smelled like dust, sweat, and humiliation. The police had gone through everything: drawers, closets, toolboxes. Even the photo album my father left behind. Pages torn. Frames flipped. The shop called the next morning. Administrative leave, they said. Until this thing clears up. Which meant you're fired, but we're pretending to be polite. That's when it sank in: whoever framed me didn't just want me arrested. They wanted me erased. I started piecing together what had happened that night. Jensen's Market, a tiny place on 10th and Meadow. The thief had shown up just after 11 p.m., wearing a ski mask, black jacket, gloves. He'd pointed a gun at the clerk, demanded the register, and ran when a delivery truck pulled in. The whole thing took under 2 minutes. CCTV caught parts of it, but the face was covered. The gloves, the ones they said had my DNA, were found behind the dumpster in the alley. That's what they called solid evidence. But I knew better. DNA doesn't magically appear on something you've never touched. Someone planted it. Which meant someone had access to my DNA, sweat, skin cells, tools, gloves. And that someone had to be close. Devin came to mind again. The new hire. 6 months younger than me, maybe mid-20s. Always talking too loud, always looking for shortcuts. He'd been working at the station next to mine, the one with the shared box of gloves. He'd joked about borrowing my gloves more than once. I hadn't thought much of it. Until now. I started digging. First, I went back to the shop. My manager, Rick, didn't want to see me there. "You shouldn't be here, Marcus," he muttered, glancing toward the office door. "People are talking. Just wait it out." "Wait it out?" I said quietly. "Someone's framing me, Rick." He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and shut the door behind us. "Look, between you and me. Devin quit yesterday. Didn't even pick up his last check. Said he got another job out of town. Packed up fast." That's when the air left my lungs. Devin quit the day after my arrest. Rick didn't know much else, just that Devin left behind a pile of junk in his locker. I asked to see it. He hesitated, then led me out back, behind the main floor. Inside Devin's locker were random things: old receipts, a cracked phone case, a half-empty energy drink can, and one crumpled pair of black nitrile gloves. Rick said he'd keep them for evidence if I wanted to tell my lawyer. I nodded, bagged them myself, and took photos. That night, I started building a folder: timestamps, texts, shift schedules, CCTV angles from the shop, Devin's employment record, even my own pay slips. Everything went in there. Every detail mattered. Because truth doesn't win on its own, it needs proof sharp enough to cut lies open. The lawyer my mother found, a quiet man named Harris, came over the next day. He looked like someone who'd seen too many hopeless cases and didn't have faith left for new ones. "We'll challenge the DNA chain of custody," he said flatly, flipping through the papers I gave him. "If it was mishandled or cross-contaminated, it'll fall apart in court." "But what if it wasn't contamination?" I asked. "What if someone deliberately planted it?" He stopped flipping the pages and looked up. "That's harder to prove. Unless you can show intent." Intent. The word echoed like metal on concrete. After Harris left, I sat there in silence, staring at the gloves I'd bagged from Devin's locker. I remembered how he'd once bragged about having a cousin who worked at a private forensics lab, said he could get away with anything if he ever got in trouble. Back then, I'd laughed it off. Now, I didn't. The next day, I went looking for that cousin. I started with Devin's Facebook, still public, still full of posts about car meets, late-night bars, and cheap bragging. In one photo, he'd tagged someone named Tyler Grant, lab tech. I clicked. Profile picture: man in a white coat, posing next to a centrifuge. And in his bio, one word: Forensic Services Division. The same company that handled the DNA evidence in my case. That was my proof, not complete, not solid, but the first crack in their perfect frame. I printed every screenshot, every connection, every timestamp. Then I looked at myself in the mirror, dark circles under my eyes, face unshaven, anger buried under exhaustion. They thought they'd buried me. But I wasn't done. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about exposing every hand that touched the lie. You can always tell when someone's lying, not by their eyes, but by their pauses. Detectives learn to weaponize silence. They don't ask to get answers, they ask to watch you think. The next time I sat in that room, I understood that better than ever. It was 3 weeks after the arrest. Harris had filed for a discovery motion to review the lab documentation that allegedly matched my DNA to the gloves. That's when the call came. Detective Sloan wanted me to come in for a follow-up discussion. Harris told me to stay calm, say nothing unnecessary, and record everything I remembered once we left. The interrogation room looked exactly like it did the first time: white walls, a metal table, one camera in the corner humming quietly like a wasp. Sloan sat across from me, tie loose, coffee cup steaming, acting casual, like we were just two guys catching up. "Marcus," he started, "you seem like a decent man. I don't think you're stupid. But right now, you're making things worse for yourself." I didn't respond. Just leaned back, stared at the scratches on the tabletop, hundreds of names carved by the desperate. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, the gloves, the market alley, stills from the CCTV footage. Then a printed lab report with the words DNA match probability, 99.9%. "This is science," Sloan said, tapping the paper. "Not bias. Not rumor. The gloves had your epithelial cells on the inner lining. That's the kind of evidence juries don't ignore." I finally looked up. "Where was the DNA processed?" He hesitated. "Just for a second. Then, standard procedure, outsourced to Grant Forensic Services." That was all I needed to hear. The same lab where Devin's cousin worked. Harris shifted beside me. "Detective Sloan, we'll need the full documentation of that sample's chain of custody, including who handled the evidence at each step. If this report is as strong as you claim, you shouldn't have an issue producing it." Sloan's eyes flicked to him, irritation, quick and sharp. "We'll provide what's relevant for the case." "That is relevant," Harris replied coolly. The tension in that room thickened, silent but dangerous. Sloan closed the folder, stood, and walked to the door. "You boys think you're smarter than forensics," he said quietly. "You're not." Then he left. For a moment, the only sound was the buzz of the fluorescent light overhead. Harris leaned back and exhaled. "He's defensive. That's good. Means there's something he doesn't want us to see." Over the next few days, I started digging deeper into the lab. The company's website listed their staff, a team of 6 analysts. And there he was, Tyler Grant, DNA processing technician 2. Same man tagged in Devin's photos. Harris filed a subpoena for lab records, but bureaucracy moves slow, too slow. So I moved faster. I drove to the building myself, a squat brick structure off the interstate, tucked between a dental clinic and a storage facility. Through the window, I could see rows of benches, vials, and cold steel instruments. It looked sterile, lifeless. A place where truth could be manufactured in silence. I didn't go inside, not yet. Instead, I waited. Hours passed. And just before dusk, a man stepped out wearing a lab coat, keycard clipped to his belt. I recognized him instantly, Tyler Grant. He got into a gray sedan, license plate coated in dust. I followed from a few cars back, down 2 exits, through an industrial stretch until he pulled into a bar, the Rusty Nail. I waited 15 minutes, then walked in. He was at the counter, scrolling through his phone. I sat 3 stools away, ordered a soda, and kept my eyes on the mirror behind the bar. When he got up to use the restroom, I slipped a napkin onto his table, blank except for 5 words written in pen. "Devin set me up. Talk." When he came back, he froze. His face went pale, eyes darting around. I didn't move, didn't even look his way. After 5 tense seconds, he crumpled the napkin, tossed it into his pocket, paid his bill, and left. I followed again, this time to a parking lot behind a pharmacy. He sat in his car for almost 10 minutes before stepping out and walking toward me. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, voice trembling.
"Neither should I replied.
"But I'm already paying for your cousin's lie." His jaw clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then tell me what I'm missing," I said. "Because my DNA showed up on gloves I never touched. Your lab handled the evidence. You see the problem?" He looked away. "I can't talk about cases." "Then listen. Devin's gone. Quit the shop, disappeared after I got arrested. That's not coincidence. And if your name's anywhere in that report, when this comes out, you're going down with him." He didn't answer. But his silence said enough. Guilt isn't loud, it's the quiet between breaths. I turned and walked away. But before I got into my car, he called after me. "Check the internal logs," he said softly. "Every sample process leaves a digital footprint, timestamp, technician ID. If the file was edited, you'll see it." That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every word, every glance, every pause. The next morning, Harris filed a motion to obtain the digital chain of custody. And within a week, the log came through, buried inside a bland PDF. But there it was. Sample 0419G, accessed twice. Once by Tyler Grant. Once by admin override. An override means someone manually altered or accessed the record after submission. That never happens in standard forensic procedure. The frame was no longer a theory. It was a system. And I was going to break it open from the inside. There's a certain kind of silence that follows discovery, not relief, not victory, just the cold awareness that you're standing at the edge of something bigger than you imagined. When Harris handed me the printed log, I didn't speak for almost a full minute. The words were simple, clinical, admin override, timestamp 2341. But to me, it was a confession written in data. Someone had tampered with the evidence file. And that someone had clearance high enough to access the administrative layer of a forensic database, something only senior staff could do. Not Devin. Not even Tyler. "Who's the admin?" I asked. Harris frowned. "That's the problem. The file was anonymized. We'll need a subpoena for their internal user directory." "How long will that take?" He exhaled through his nose. "Weeks, maybe longer. They'll drag it out." Weeks. I didn't have weeks. Every day this dragged on, my name sank deeper into rumor and ridicule. The whispers at the grocery store. The sudden silence when I walked into a room. Even old friends stopped picking up my calls. So I did what the innocent have to do when the system stops caring. I started my own investigation. The lab's website listed a press email. I sent a polite message first, formal, professional. Asked about their protocols for evidence handling. Got a canned response back: "We follow state and federal standards for all DNA analysis. Thank you for your inquiry." So I sent another, this one less polite. I hinted that I had information about data irregularities involving an admin override. That got a reaction. Within a day, I received a reply from someone claiming to be Marissa Lang, Quality Assurance Supervisor. She wanted to clarify any misunderstandings in person. We met at a coffee shop near downtown. She was in her mid-30s, sharp eyes behind square glasses, the kind of person who had memorized every line of her employee handbook. I could tell she was nervous, the way she stirred her coffee without drinking it. "You said you had concerns about a sample override?" she asked, voice steady but tight. "I don't just have concerns," I said. "I have the timestamp. 2341. Admin override on sample 0419G, the one used to put me in jail." Her hand froze mid-stir. Then she set the spoon down. "That shouldn't be possible. Overrides are logged under a supervisor's credentials. No one uses them unless there's a system error. Or unless someone's altering data," I said. She didn't deny it. She just looked at me, really looked at me. "What's your name?" "Marcus Hale." Her expression changed. Not surprise, recognition. She leaned back slowly. "You're the mechanic. The robbery case." "Yeah," I said. "The one you people matched with 99.9% certainty." She hesitated. "I didn't handle your file, but I reviewed part of the batch for QA. Something felt off. The DNA concentration was unusually clean, almost too perfect. Most crime scene samples are messy, degraded. Yours read like a direct swab." "From what?" She didn't answer. Just whispered, "You need to see something." She pulled out her phone, opened a photo. It was a screenshot of an internal email, partially redacted, subject line: expedited sample verification, Hale case. The sender was listed as T. Grant. The recipient? A. Lark, senior supervisor. "Who's Lark?" I asked. She glanced around before answering. "Alan Lark. Head of operations. He's the only one with admin override access." I felt the world tilt slightly. "So he's the one who changed the file." "Maybe," she said softly. "But you need proof before you accuse him. Internal audits leave trails. If he did it, there'll be metadata, login times, digital certificates, even printer logs." I thanked her, told her to stay quiet, and left before anyone could see us together. That night, I started researching Lark. His LinkedIn page read like a model employee: 15 years in forensics, countless commendations, guest lecturer at 2 universities. But buried deep in a public court record archive, I found something else, a lawsuit. 3 years ago, Lark had been accused of falsifying lab results in a civil case, an employment dispute that mysteriously disappeared after an out-of-court settlement. Same pattern. Same silence. I called Harris. He's done this before, I said. Lark. He covered it up once. Harris whistled low. If we can prove he touched your file, the entire case collapses. But you'll need direct evidence, something admissible. Screenshots won't cut it. That meant getting inside the lab system. Legally, of course, or close enough. I reached back out to Marissa. This time, she didn't hesitate. Meet me tomorrow night, she said. Back lot, east side entrance. I can't give you files, but I can show you where to look. The next evening, the sky was bruised with rain clouds. I parked a block away and waited until her car pulled in. She waved me over and unlocked a side door. Inside, the air was cold and chemical, a mix of ethanol and ozone. We slipped past rows of machines humming quietly in the dark. She pointed to a workstation near the back. Terminal 3. That's Lark's. He's the only one with high-level access. Can you log in? I asked. No, she whispered. But I can show you something. She opened a drawer, revealing a stack of printed records, nightly access logs. Each page was dated and timestamped, signed by the technician on duty. I flipped through until I found the night of my evidence submission. The last entry read: 2339, Grant, Tyler, upload completed. 2341, Lark, Alan, admin override, flag removed. I didn't even need to know what flag removed meant. It meant interference. Can I take this? I asked. She shook her head. If that disappears, I lose my job. But you can photograph it. Fast. I pulled out my phone, snapped a few pictures, and slipped out the way we came in. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the car. I looked at the photos again under the dim dashboard light. 2 names. 2 times. 2 lives colliding in one act of fraud. Devin might have set me up, but Lark had made it real. And now I had proof that the lie had a fingerprint. Next, I'd have to make the world see it. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I'd already gone 20 hours without sleep. My mind was racing too fast for rest, every thought like a spark looking for gasoline. The photos from Marissa burned holes in my phone screen. 2341. Admin override. Flag removed. Lark's name beside it. That wasn't just tampering, that was intent. But evidence only mattered if it could survive the courtroom. And the truth, I was learning, was fragile. Without a verified source or corroborating chain, those photos were just pictures. Anyone could say they were doctored. I needed something verifiable. Something with a signature that couldn't be denied. That's when Harris called. I've got news, he said, voice low and careful. Lark's lab just submitted an amended report to the DA's office. Amended? Yeah. They revised the DNA sequence data, claiming an earlier cross-contamination flag was accidentally cleared. The new report strengthens the match instead of weakening it. My chest went cold. They're doubling down. Exactly, Harris said. They know we're closing in, and now they're reinforcing the lie to cover themselves. I hung up, pacing the room. If Lark was rewriting evidence, it meant one thing: there was something he didn't want anyone to see. And I had to find it before he buried it. I started digging through the public records again, cross-referencing financial disclosures, company filings, anything with his name on it. That's when I saw it, a quarterly report showing a transfer of forensic service contracts from Grant Forensic Services to a shell subsidiary, Northline Diagnostics LLC, registered only 2 months earlier. At first glance, it looked like a standard corporate shuffle. But when I traced the ownership, the trail bent in a familiar direction. Devin's cousin, Tyler Grant, was listed as a silent shareholder. They weren't just manipulating evidence. They were laundering the entire chain of custody through a new company, one step removed from accountability. I called Marissa again. Does Northline handle DNA processing now? Silence. Then, you weren't supposed to know about that. Which means I'm right, I said. They transferred the samples. She exhaled hard. Lark moved part of our caseload to Northline to streamline operations. But we all know what that means: fewer eyes, fewer logs, less oversight. Once evidence goes there, it's practically untraceable. Can you prove it? Not without exposing myself. But there's one way. Every inter-lab transfer requires a physical manifest, Assigned inventory list. One copy stays here. The other goes to the new facility. Where's yours? In the archive room. Locked cabinet. Access logged, but not monitored at night. That was all I needed to hear. That night, I went back. Not through the front, too visible. I parked in the same lot as before, pulled my hoodie tight, and slipped through the east door Marissa had shown me. Inside, the lights were dimmed, just the faint hum of refrigerators and the distant beep of monitors. She met me in the hallway, hair tied back, face pale. "You have 10 minutes, she whispered. The archive room was colder than I remembered. Steel shelves, numbered boxes, each one marked with case IDs. Marissa moved quickly, scanning the labels. Then she stopped. "Here," she said. "Enter lab transfer logs, Q3, 2023. She pulled a folder and flipped it open. Dozens of forms, each one stamped and initialed. She thumbed through until she found it. Case, Hale, Marcus, evidence type, nitrile gloves, black. There it was, a signed record showing the gloves were transferred from Grant Forensic Services to Northline Diagnostics 3 days after my arrest. That violated every chain of custody rule in existence. Marissa's hands trembled. They never logged this in the official record. They hid it. If the DA finds out, Lark's career is over. I took photos of every page. Date. Signatures. Courier details. Even the internal reference code at the top. But what stopped me cold was one name at the bottom, written in sharp, deliberate ink. Transfer authorized by A. Lark. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Proof, his own hand. When I left the lab that night, the rain was falling sideways, cold and merciless. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to power. I wasn't a victim anymore. I had evidence. The next morning, Harris reviewed the photos. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. "This is good. Very good. But we need a witness, someone from inside the lab to confirm it's authentic." "Marissa?" I asked. He hesitated. "If she testifies, she'll lose her job. Maybe more. But without her, the DA can claim these photos are circumstantial." I knew he was right. And I hated that he was. So I went to see Marissa one last time. She was waiting in her car outside the lab, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes distant. "I can't," she said before I even asked. "They'll blacklist me. I'll never work again." I nodded slowly. "Then help me another way." She turned toward me. "What way?" "Give me a way to prove the transfer exists, something they can't erase." She bit her lip, thinking. Then, quietly, the manifests were scanned into the lab's backup server. "It's not connected to the network, it's offline, air-gapped. But the system keeps a local backup log. If you can get a copy of that, you'll have a digital fingerprint, proof that the transfer file existed before it was deleted." "How?" She looked around, then pressed a small keycard into my palm. "This opens the server room. But you didn't get it from me." That night, I sat in my car for hours, staring at the keycard. My reflection in the windshield looked like someone else, hollow-eyed, unshaven, dangerous. I was about to walk into a lab, break into a restricted server, and steal digital evidence. Not for revenge. For truth. If I failed, I'd be finished. If I succeeded, I'd finally have the weapon to destroy them. The keycard burned in my pocket the entire night. It wasn't guilt that made it feel heavy, it was purpose. Every second I hesitated, Lark's lies hardened into fact, his falsified evidence calcifying into something the courts would treat as truth. I couldn't let that happen. The streets were slick with rain when I pulled into the back lot of the lab. Midnight. No cars, no guards, just the low mechanical hum of refrigerated air moving through steel vents. I killed the engine, stepped out, and for the first time since my arrest, I didn't feel fear. I felt precision. The keycard slid through the reader with a muted beep. The lock clicked open. Inside, the hallway glowed faintly blue from emergency lights. Every sound was amplified, the buzz of fluorescence, the squeak of my shoes, the heartbeat I couldn't silence. The server room was colder than I expected, sterile, humming, lined with black towers of blinking lights. The air smelled faintly of ozone and bleach. This was the core of their deception. Rows of machines, silent accomplices. Marissa had told me where to look, the offline archive terminal. I found it in the corner, screensaver looping, cursor blinking like a pulse. I inserted the encrypted drive I'd brought and opened the directory labeled Q3 transfer logs. Hundreds of entries scrolled past. Dates, case numbers, initials. Then I saw it. Case, Hale, Marcus, evidence type, black nitrile gloves. Timestamp, 3 days after my arrest. Authorization, A. Lark. Note, flag removed. Those 2 words, flag removed, told the whole story. My contamination warning had been manually deleted. Someone had gone in, erased the truth, and rebuilt the lie from its ashes. I copied the entire folder. The progress bar crawled like a heartbeat in slow motion. Then, halfway through, a metallic sound echoed down the corridor, footsteps. Slow. Close. I froze. The copy finished. I pulled the drive and killed the screen. The footsteps paused just outside the door. A key rattled in the lock. I backed into the shadows, breath shallow, hand gripping the drive like a weapon. The door opened an inch. Then stopped. The person outside hesitated, then turned away. The sound of retreating steps faded. I didn't move until silence returned. I slipped out the back, rain washing the adrenaline off my face. My car felt like sanctuary. I sat there shaking, watching water beat across the windshield. Then I looked down at the drive in my hand and whispered, "Got you." That night, I sent the files to Layla, an old friend from high school who now ran a university forensic research lab. Someone who still believed in the science before the system corrupted it. For days, I waited. Then she called, voice taut with disbelief, "Marcus. You weren't paranoid. The files are real, and they've been edited." She explained it in the cold language of forensics. The metadata showed 2 separate creation layers. The first, generated the night of my arrest, contained a contamination flag, a note about a possible cross-sample DNA mix. The second version, the one submitted to the DA, had that line deleted. Both bore the same signature, A. Lark. But that wasn't all. Layla had uncovered remnants of a working draft, a temporary file the system failed to fully delete. In it was a single internal comment, "Remove contamination note before release, Al." A digital fingerprint. Not metaphorical, literal. She sent me the hash logs, the timestamps, the machine signature. Everything pointed to Lark's workstation. The evidence wasn't just altered. It was rewritten, line by line, under his ID. When I showed the findings to Harris, he sat back, speechless. "You're telling me the lab director forged state evidence?" "I'm telling you he engineered a conviction," I said. "Mine." He rubbed his eyes. "If this is real, the DA's office will have no choice but to suspend proceedings. But we'll need corroboration, testimony. Someone inside the lab." "Marissa," I said. He nodded slowly. "If she's willing to go on record, this becomes explosive. If not, it's circumstantial. Strong, but deniable." The next evening, I found Marissa sitting in her car outside the lab, engine off, rain sliding down the glass. She looked like someone already half haunted. "They know something," she said quietly. "Lark called a meeting this morning. He said there's been an internal breach. They're tightening security, monitoring log access. He's scared, Marcus. That means he knows." "Then we hit him first," I said. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. "If I talk, my career's gone. My life's gone." I reached into my jacket, pulled out a printout of Lark's digital signature on the tampered file. "He already took your career the moment he did this," I said. "You just haven't realized it yet." She didn't look up. Just whispered, "There's a backup you haven't found yet, not in the main server. It's on an external device Lark keeps in his office. A mirrored drive. If you get that, it's over." I stared through the windshield, rain streaking like veins across the glass. Then that's where I go next. That night, for the first time, I didn't feel hunted. I felt like the hunter. Because now the fingerprints weren't mine, they were his. And soon, everyone would see them. By the time dawn cracked the sky, I'd memorized every inch of Lark's office layout from Marissa's whispered description, the mirrored drive hidden behind a false panel in his filing cabinet, the password-protected laptop docked beside it, and the way he always left around 6:30 for his morning run before coming back an hour later. That gave me one window, 60 minutes to expose the man who'd built my prison out of science and deceit. But this time, I wasn't sneaking in as a ghost. I was walking in like someone who'd already been buried once and didn't care if the dirt came down again. Harris thought I was insane. "Marcus, this isn't a movie," he said, voice sharp over the phone. "We already have enough to push for an internal inquiry. You don't need to break into his office." "Yes, I do," I told him. "Because you know how the system works. They'll file a complaint, review procedures, issue a press release, and by the time they're done, the data will be scrubbed clean. He didn't answer. Silence is the sound of someone who knows you're right. That night, I parked 2 blocks from the lab, under a dying streetlight. The air was heavy with static, the kind that precedes both storms and confessions. I slipped the same keycard into the reader. The door beeped red this time, access revoked. I smiled grimly, pulled a clone backup Marissa had made for me, and tried again. Green. Inside, the hallways were darker. Cameras tilted slightly higher than before, a new angle. They were expecting something. But I'd learned a long time ago that you can't outfight suspicion, you have to drown it in truth. Lark's office was on the 2nd floor. Frosted glass door. Nameplate polished to a mirror. I jimmied the latch with a flathead screwdriver wrapped in electrical tape, no prints. The door clicked open. Inside, the room smelled faintly of cologne and coffee grounds. Clean desk. 2 framed certificates. And there, behind the file cabinet, the hidden panel Marissa had described. I pried it open gently. A silver external drive sat in a foam slot, cables snaking into the back of the workstation. I plugged my own drive into the secondary port, booted his laptop, and bypassed the first password prompt with a trick Layla had shown me: boot from safe mode, load the recovery shell, extract user credentials from memory. It took 60 seconds. The desktop appeared. No background image. Just a folder titled Archived Evidence Transfers. I opened it. Inside were 33 subfolders, each named for a different case. But one stood out, a simple string of letters and numbers, 0419G. My case. I clicked. The screen filled with files, metadata logs, test sequences, forensic reports, and one hidden document, last modified date, 1 day after my arrest. The file name, review_override. docx. I opened it, expecting technical jargon. But what I found was simpler. Cleaner. More human. Per directive, remove contamination node and reclassify match. Case Hale, grant sample, to proceed as confirmed. Ensure copy sent to DA before Monday.
A.L.
That single paragraph, flat, clinical, and damning, was the digital bullet I'd been chasing. I copied everything: the document, the backup logs, the local timestamps, even the user credential metadata that tied the edit to Lark's system ID. Then I created a checksum file, a digital fingerprint of the data that proved its integrity. Layla had taught me that once you create a checksum, you make history unerasable. If anyone altered the files, the checksum would change, proof of tampering. I had him. Completely. I was halfway to the door when I saw the red blink on the wall, security system active. A camera pivoted slightly, its lens adjusting. I froze. They'd upgraded to motion tracking. A voice broke through the silence. Step away from the desk. I turned slowly. Lark stood in the doorway, wearing gym clothes, sweat still clinging to his forehead. His voice was calm, too calm. I figured you'd come back, he said. Curiosity's a dangerous habit. You should know, I said quietly. He smiled faintly. Do you really think anyone will believe you? You're the criminal, Marcus. The system already chose a villain. I looked him in the eye. Maybe. But the metadata didn't. He hesitated, confusion flickering, just long enough. I pulled the drive from the port, slipped it into my pocket, and brushed past him. He reached for my arm, but I twisted away, pushing through the hallway. The alarm started before I hit the stairs, silent at first, then a piercing screech that shook the walls. By the time I hit the parking lot, 2 security guards were shouting behind me. I didn't look back. My car roared to life, tires squealing across wet asphalt. In the mirror, I saw Lark step into the light, phone to his ear, face ghost pale. He knew what I'd taken. And he knew it was enough to destroy him. I drove straight to Harris's house, didn't care that it was 3 a.m. I pounded on his door until he appeared, half asleep in a robe. You better have a damn good reason for this, he muttered. I held up the drive. I have his confession. Metadata, signature, timestamp. Everything. He took the drive and stared at it for a long, silent moment. Then, quietly, we're done playing defense. The next morning, Harris walked into the DA's office with the drive, Layla's forensic memo, and copies of the manifest photos. By noon, the DA had ordered an independent audit. By sunset, Grant Forensic Services was locked down under state investigation. And by nightfall, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you've won. But you have no idea what you've started.
A.L.
For the first time since the arrest, I smiled. Because he was right. I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. The story broke 3 days later. It started as a whisper, a leaked memo on a local journalism site known for chasing corruption in the county. Then, within hours, it spread across every major outlet: DNA lab under investigation for evidence tampering, supervisor named in forgery allegations. The headline didn't mention me, not yet. But I knew exactly whose case had ignited it. The article cited an anonymous source within the forensic community, Layla, most likely, confirming that metadata analysis revealed deliberate manipulation of DNA reports submitted to the district attorney's office. They didn't release the files, but they didn't need to. The words chain of custody violations and probable fabrication hit harder than any photograph ever could. By noon, the State Forensic Oversight Board had suspended Grant Forensic Services and its affiliate, Northline Diagnostics, pending a full audit. And by sunset, my name was finally cleared, quietly, cautiously, through a one-line update buried in the evening news ticker. Charges dropped against local auto mechanic following forensic review. That was it. No apology. No fanfare. Just one sentence. But that single line felt like oxygen after months underwater. Still, I wasn't satisfied. Because while I'd been fighting for my life, the people who tried to bury me were still breathing easy. Lark was on administrative leave. Devin was still missing. Tyler Grant had gone silent. They were ghosts, and the system was content to let them vanish. So I decided to do what the system wouldn't. I decided to make it public. Harris warned me. Once you go to the press, it's a war. They'll smear you, Marcus. Paint you as bitter, unstable, revenge-driven. You sure you want that? I don't want revenge, I said. I want the truth on record. But we both knew that wasn't entirely true. I wanted justice, and if justice demanded exposure, then I'd burn the whole facade to ash. Layla helped me prepare everything: the digital trail, the checks on proofs, the timestamp comparisons, the screenshots of the internal messages. We compiled it all into a single document, the Hale Report. 57 pages, concise, factual, damning. Then I sent it to every journalist who had ever written about wrongful convictions. Within 48 hours, I got a reply from a name I recognized: Kara Nunez, an investigative reporter with the Chronicle, known for dismantling crooked cops and corrupt DAs. We met in the same coffee shop where I'd first met Marissa. She arrived with a notepad, a recorder, and eyes that saw everything. "I read your report twice," she said without preamble. "It's airtight, but the state won't act unless there's a face behind it. That means you. Once this goes out, your life changes. Are you ready for that?" I didn't hesitate. I've already lost everything once. This time, I lose on my own terms. She nodded, hit record, and said softly, "Tell me what happened that night." I told her everything: the raid, the cuffs, the humiliation, the silence in the interrogation room, the discovery of Devin's connection, the files, the lies, the override, the comment in Lark's draft. Every word I'd choked on for months poured out like broken glass. When I finished, she sat there for a long time, no notes, no reaction, just quiet. Then she said, "We'll run it Sunday. Front page." The next 3 days were a blur of calls, emails, and background checks. Kara verified everything: the timestamps, the lab's procedures, even the original employment logs from the shop. She was surgical. Unflinching. When the story finally dropped, it exploded. The mechanic they tried to frame, inside a DNA lab's dirty secret. The headline ran in bold across national feeds. My photo, one I hadn't even known she took, showed me standing outside the courthouse, jaw set, eyes hollow but unbroken. Underneath it, a subheading that made my heart stop: false DNA evidence, corporate cover-ups, and the man who refused to be erased. Within hours, the phone started ringing. Old friends. Reporters. Strangers. Victims from other cases. People who'd been burned by the same lab. By evening, 2 other wrongful convictions were already being re-examined. A storm was building, not against me this time, but against them. Harris called around midnight, voice almost disbelieving. "Marcus. You did it. The DA's office just opened a criminal investigation into Lark and Grant. They're calling it systemic fraud." I didn't answer right away. I was standing on my porch, staring at the streetlight flickering in the rain. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. And maybe a hint of fear, because the truth, once unleashed, doesn't stop moving. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something in me wanted to. "Marcus Hale?" The voice was low, calm, familiar. You think you've won. But you didn't expose me. You exposed them. You think I worked alone? The line went dead before I could respond. The number traced back to a prepaid burner phone. No way to find the source. But I didn't need to. Because I recognized the cadence. The arrogance. The tone. Devin. He wasn't gone. He was watching. And for the first time since clearing my name, I realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something far darker. The week after the article dropped felt unreal, like the world had shifted beneath me but refused to settle. 1 minute, I was a ghost, the next, a headline. Everyone had an opinion. Some called me brave. Some called me lucky. And some, the ones who'd believed I was guilty, just looked away when I passed them on the street. Justice doesn't give you closure. It gives you aftermath. The DA held a press conference on Friday morning. I watched it from my mother's living room, same spot where the police had cuffed me months before. This time, the TV showed a podium, microphones, flashing cameras, and a trembling official voice reading my redemption like a legal technicality. After independent forensic review, the state confirms multiple instances of evidence falsification at Grant Forensic Services. All charges against Marcus Hale have been formally dismissed. A criminal investigation into lab director Alan Lark and associated personnel is underway. No apology. No, we're sorry we destroyed your life. Just dismissed. But behind that sterile language, something powerful was breaking open. By afternoon, the state police raided both Grant Forensic Services and Northline Diagnostics. Boxes of files, sealed samples, hard drives, everything hauled out in plain sight. The same white vans that once took me away in handcuffs were now carrying away the people who'd done this to me. Layla called that night, her voice sharp with adrenaline. They found the backup drive, Marcus, the same one you copied. It's real. They can match the metadata. They're not just losing their jobs. They're going to prison. Lark? I asked. They arrested him at his house this morning. He didn't say a word. His lawyer did all the talking, something about clerical misinterpretations. But the file logs don't lie. I sat there in silence, staring at the TV. The local station was running a new segment now. Forensic director arrested in evidence tampering case, possible link to multiple wrongful convictions. The image showed Lark in a dark suit, hands cuffed in front of him, eyes lowered. And beneath that, my name, scrolling quietly across the screen. Marcus Hale, 32, auto mechanic, exonerated. It should have felt like victory. But it didn't. Not yet. Because Devin was still out there. And I knew, with the kind of cold certainty that keeps you awake at night, that he was the origin. Lark had falsified the lab data, but Devin had planted the gloves. He'd started the fire. And I was going to find him. Harris tried to stop me. Marcus, let it go. The state's building a case. They'll get him if he's involved. I laughed, bitter. They didn't get him the first time. They won't this time either, so I went looking. Devin had scrubbed his online presence, no Facebook, no Instagram, no trace of his old number. But he'd always been careless with one thing, money. I called Rick at the shop, asked if any checks had ever gone unclaimed. Yeah, Rick said. Devin's last paycheck. Never cashed. Can you pull the stub? He hesitated. You're not still chasing this, are you? Please, Rick. He sighed. Fine. But I want this to be over for you, Marcus. You deserve peace. He sent me a scan of the stub that night. Printed across the top, deposit to account ending in 2214. That was my thread. Through a friend at a local credit union, I traced the partial number to a bank in a neighboring county. And 2 days later, I had what I needed. Devin's account had been accessed last week, a cash withdrawal for $1,500, made at an ATM just outside the city limits. He was still close. I drove there the same night. The town was small, 2 gas stations, a diner, and a rundown motel called the Redwood Inn. I asked the clerk if anyone named Devin Grant had checked in recently. He shook his head. But when I described him, tall, blonde, nervous eyes, the clerk frowned. Room 9. Checked in last Friday. Paid in cash. Goes by Daniel now. I slipped him $100 and walked out before he could ask more. Room 9 was at the far end of the building. The blinds were drawn, a faint light flickering behind them. My heart was steady. Cold. I knocked once. No answer. Then I heard it, the soft rustle of movement inside. I spoke through the door. Devin. It's Marcus. Silence. Then a low voice, hesitant. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. The lock clicked. The door opened an inch. His face was thinner, eyes darker, but it was him. Why'd you do it? I asked. He looked over his shoulder, like someone might be listening. You don't understand. Lark made me. No, I said quietly. He used you. You framed me. He swallowed hard. He said you'd get probation, that it'd be clean. That they needed a match to secure the lab's new contract. He said no one would get hurt. You believe that? He looked away. I didn't know they'd keep it going. After the test. I stared at him, at the cowardice bleeding through his voice. You planted those gloves, didn't you? He didn't answer. But his silence was enough. Then you're going to fix it, I said. What? You're going to sign a statement. Tell them everything. The theft, the setup, the lab's cover-up. Or I swear to God, Devin, I'll make sure every reporter in this country knows your name before sunrise. He froze, staring at me. Then, slowly, he nodded. 2 days later, his statement landed on Harris's desk. Signed. Verified. When the DA's office released its final report, it wasn't just Lark on trial. It was Devin too, the man who'd planted the gloves. The story hit the national circuit again. This time, the headline was simple: mechanic cleared in DNA frame job as second arrest made. And when they showed the footage of Devin being led out of that motel in cuffs, head down, I didn't smile. I just closed my eyes and let the silence wash over me. Justice doesn't roar. It exhales. But even as the noise faded, I knew the scars would stay. Freedom doesn't erase the fingerprints, it just reclaims them. The trial took 6 months. 6 long, grinding months of headlines, hearings, statements, and faces I never wanted to see again. But every day that passed, I felt something shift, the scales finally starting to tilt back toward truth. When I took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Reporters filled the gallery, cameras waiting for a single moment of emotion, a single tremor in my voice. But I didn't give them one. I'd already given enough. Harris walked me through it: the arrest, the DNA, the override, the digital evidence, Devin's confession. I spoke like a mechanic explaining an engine, calmly, piece by piece, showing how the machine of deceit was built and how I dismantled it. When he showed the jury the printed email, "Remove contamination note before release, Al," I watched them lean forward, reading it as if it were scripture. And when he displayed the chain of custody manifest with Lark's signature, I saw something else in their eyes: anger. Lark sat across the room, pale and rigid, his once polished composure stripped down to ash. Devin was there too, thinner, quieter, reduced. Tyler Grant had flipped early in the case, cutting a deal that bought him immunity in exchange for testimony. His voice trembled when he described how Lark had ordered him to clean the file. The prosecution called it a calculated conspiracy to manufacture evidence. The defense called it a procedural misunderstanding. The truth called it what it was: corruption, wrapped in science. When the verdict came, the room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the lights. Guilty. Lark, convicted on charges of evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and perjury. Devin, guilty of falsifying evidence and conspiracy to defraud law enforcement. The gavel fell like a door closing. And for the first time since that morning when the police shattered my door, I felt the weight lift. Not all of it. But enough. After the trial, reporters chased me down the courthouse steps. Cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. "Marcus, what do you want to say to the people who doubted you?" I stopped, looked straight into the lens, and said quietly, "I want to say that truth doesn't die. It waits." They printed that line everywhere. But what I didn't say was the rest: it waits, and it remembers. Because while justice was served, it didn't erase what came before: the nights in the cell, the humiliation, my mother's fear, the empty shop bay where my life had stopped. It took months to rebuild. The auto shop reopened under new management. Rick rehired me, this time as foreman. The first week back, a customer recognized me from the news and hesitated before handing me her keys. Then she smiled, small, nervous, human. "I read about you," she said. "I'm glad you're still standing." I told her the truth. "So am I." The DA offered a settlement, $320,000 for wrongful prosecution. I took it, not for the money, but for what it symbolized: that they had to pay for every scar they'd tried to hide. Half went to my mother's medical bills. The rest, I used to start something I wish had existed when I needed it: a legal aid fund for victims of forensic misconduct. Layla joined as an advisor. Harris handled the filings. We called it the Second Trace Foundation, because every lie leaves one. Sometimes, at night, I still wake up at 3 a.m., hearing the echo of that first knock, the crash of my front door, the officer shouting my name like a sentence. But now, when I open my eyes, there's no cell ceiling, just the steady hum of my own house, the sound of rain on the roof. And in that silence, I remind myself, they tried to erase me with science, but I rewrote the evidence with truth. Justice didn't come easily. It never does. But when it came, it stayed. Because the fingerprints they used to frame me? They became the fingerprints that proved I was right.